The vacation photos appeared on Facebook 3 days after I was admitted to the ICU. My parents on a beach in Cancun. Umbrella drinks. Sunset shots. Captions about much-needed relaxation, and finally taking time for ourselves. I was 28 years old, intubated, and in septic shock from a ruptured appendix that had gone undiagnosed for 4 days. "Your parents are where?" my ICU nurse asked, staring at her computer screen where she'd pulled up my emergency contacts. "Mexico," I whispered through the oxygen mask. Speaking was difficult. Everything was difficult. "They left yesterday." "They left after you were admitted to ICU?" "They said I was being dramatic. That I always exaggerate medical stuff." My voice cracked. "Said the vacation was already paid for." The nurse, Sarah, according to her badge, looked like she wanted to say something. Instead, she just squeezed my hand gently and adjusted my fore. I was Dr. Jordan Maxwell, Director of Healthcare Initiatives at the National Medical Research Foundation. I managed a $200 million grant program funding hospitals and research centers across the country. I reviewed applications, allocated resources, and decided which institutions received funding for critical medical programs. My parents ran the regional medical center in our hometown. Dad was the CEO. Mom was the chief operating officer. They'd built their careers on healthcare administration, on understanding medical systems, on knowing how hospitals functioned. They knew what ICU admission meant. They just didn't care when the patient was me. The appendix pain had started 5 days ago. I'd called Mom, a medical professional who'd spent 30 years in healthcare administration. "Something's really wrong. The pain is severe. I'm running a fever." "You always think you're dying, Jordan. Take some Tylenol and rest." Her dismissal was immediate. "You probably just ate something bad." By day 2 I couldn't stand upright. "Called Dad. I need to go to the ER. I can barely move." ERs are for emergencies. "You have a stomachache. Drink some ginger ale. Stop being so dramatic." By day 3 I was vomiting and delirious with fever. My roommate, Claire, ignored my protests and called 911. The paramedics found me unconscious on the bathroom floor. The ear doctor was horrified. "Your appendix ruptured at least 24 hours ago. You have peritonitis and you're going into septic shock. You could have died." Emergency surgery. 18 hours in the OR removing infected tissue. 3 days in ICU on ventilator support and 4 antibiotics. My white blood cell count so high it couldn't be accurately measured. I texted my parents from recovery. In ICU. Ruptured appendix. Septic. It was serious. Mom's response: "See, they fixed it. You'll be fine. We're heading to airport. Call you when we're back." They boarded a plane to Cancun while I was on a ventilator. Claire stayed. She called my office, explained the situation, arranged coverage for my work. She also called my younger sister, Emma, who was in medical school across the country. Emma arrived within 12 hours, furious and terrified. "They went on vacation while you're in ICU. Already paid for," I managed. "Non-refundable. You could have died, Jordan. You almost did die." She grabbed my hand carefully, avoiding the 4 lines. "When you get out of here, we're having a serious conversation about Mom and Dad. But first I had to survive. The sepsis had triggered ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. My lungs were failing. The doctors added more equipment, more medications, more worried expressions during rounds. Dr. Patricia Chin, the ICU attending, pulled Emma aside one morning. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw Emma's face crumble. Saw her crying in the hallway. Saw Dr. Chen's hand on her shoulder. Later, Emma told me, "They said you're critical. That the next 48 hours will determine if you make it." I'd spent the past 3 years reviewing grant applications from hospitals for critical care equipment, ICU expansions, sepsis protocols. I knew the statistics. I knew septic shock mortality rates. I knew what critical meant. My parents posted more beach photos. On day 6 in the ICU, I stabilized enough to breathe without the ventilator. Dr. Chin removed the breathing tube and I gulped air like I'd been drowning. "You're a fighter," she said, genuine warmth in her voice. "But Jordan, I need to ask, where are your parents?" "On vacation." "During this." She gestured to the bank of monitors, the 4 poles, the equipment keeping me alive. "They know you were critical? That you almost died?" I told them. They said I was exaggerating. Dr. Chen's expression went very still. They're both healthcare administrators? They run Regional Medical Center. 2 hours from here. The Regional Medical Center. She pulled out her phone, typing something. Your parents are Richard and Susan Maxwell? You know them. I know of them. They've applied for several grants through various programs. She looked at me carefully. And you're Dr. Jordan Maxwell, Director of Healthcare Initiatives at the National Medical Research Foundation. My brain was still foggy from sedation and illness, but the pieces clicked together. Our foundation funds their center. Among others. Dr. Chen sat down beside my bed. Jordan, what your parents did, going on vacation while their child was in critical condition in an ICU, that speaks to fundamental problems with priorities and judgment. Especially for healthcare leaders. They've always been like this. My health issues are inconvenient. Inconvenient. She shook her head. You had a ruptured appendix and septic shock. You were on a ventilator. This wasn't inconvenient. This was life-threatening. And they chose beach umbrellas over being here. Emma returned with coffee, stopping when she saw Dr. Chen's expression. What's wrong? I'm just processing that your parents run a medical center while demonstrating a complete lack of understanding about what constitutes a medical emergency. Dr. Chen looked at Emma. Has this happened before? Always, Emma said quietly. Jordan broke her arm in high school. They said she was being dramatic and made her wait 3 days to see a doctor. She's had migraines for years. They call them attention-seeking headaches. When she had pneumonia in college, they told her to stop playing sick. They're healthcare administrators who consistently minimize and dismiss medical symptoms in their own child. Dr. Chen's tone was clinical now. That's concerning professional judgment. She stood. Jordan, focus on recovering. But when you're ready, we should talk about what happened here. About the pattern of medical neglect. My parents returned from vacation on day 9. I'd been moved out of ICU to a regular room, still weak but stable. They walked in with tans and relaxed smiles. Look at you, up and around. Mom's voice was cheerful. See? We knew you'd be fine. You always bounce back. I was on a ventilator. I almost died. But you didn't. Dad shrugged. Doctors always make things sound worse than they are. That's how they justify their fees. Emma, sitting beside my bed, stood abruptly. She had a 40% mortality risk. She was critical for 6 days. And you were drinking margaritas in Mexico. Emma, don't be dramatic like your sister, Mom said. Jordan's always had a flair for exaggerating medical situations. Remember that broken arm? That was just a bad sprain. It was broken. In 2 places. I have the x-rays. Well, you're fine now, so no harm done. Mom looked around the room. When are they discharging you? You've probably been here long enough. I'm being released tomorrow, I said quietly. Claire's picking me up. Your roommate instead of your parents? Dad frowned. That seems unnecessary. We can get you. You were on vacation while I was in ICU. Claire stayed. She gets to take me home. They looked genuinely confused about why I was upset. 30 years in healthcare administration, and they couldn't understand why abandoning your critically ill child was problematic. After they left, Dr. Chen appeared. I overheard some of that. Jordan, I need to document this in your medical record. The 4-day delay in seeking treatment because family dismissed symptoms, the lack of family support during critical illness. It's all medically relevant. Why? Because patterns of medical neglect affect patient outcomes. And because your parents run a hospital. She pulled up her tablet. If they can't recognize a medical emergency in their own child, what are they missing in their facility? 2 weeks later, recovered enough to return to work part-time, I found a familiar name on my desk. Regional Medical Center, grant application for ICU expansion and critical care equipment $3.2 million request. My parents' facility. Requesting funding to expand the exact type of critical care unit that had saved my life while they were on vacation. I read the application carefully. It was well written, professionally presented. They requested funding for 10 additional ICU beds, upgraded monitoring equipment, enhanced sepsis protocols and family support services. Family support services. The irony was devastating. The application included a personal statement from my father. As healthcare leaders, We understand the critical importance of family presence during medical crises. Our facility is committed to creating an environment where families can support their loved ones through the most challenging medical situations. He'd written that 3 weeks after choosing Cancun over my ICU bedside. I documented everything. The timeline of my illness and their dismissals. The 4 days of delayed treatment because they told me I was exaggerating. The vacation during my critical care. Dr. Chen's medical notes about family absence during life-threatening illness. Emma's statement about the pattern of medical neglect throughout my childhood. Then I wrote my review. Application demonstrates strong technical merit and identified community need. However, serious concerns exist regarding applicant leadership's judgment, priorities, and understanding of family-centered care principles. Recommending denial pending leadership review. I flagged it for the full grant committee's attention. The committee met Friday morning. 8 members, including myself, Dr. Patricia Chen, who'd been invited as an ICU specialist consultant, and 2 other healthcare administrators. I'd recused myself from the final vote but was present for the discussion. Regional Medical Center is requesting significant funding, the committee chair began. Dr. Maxwell has flagged concerns. Can you elaborate? I explained. Clinically, professionally. The timeline of my appendicitis. The dismissals. The pattern of medical neglect from healthcare administrators who should know better. Dr. Chen added her perspective. I treated Dr. Maxwell during her critical illness. Her parents, the applicants, were notified she was in septic shock and chose to board a plane to Mexico. They returned 9 days later after she was out of immediate danger, and seemed confused about why their absence was problematic. The room was silent. They run a hospital? One committee member asked. Regional Medical Center. For 15 years, I confirmed. Another member pulled up their application. Their proposal emphasizes family-centered care and recognizing the critical importance of family presence during medical crises. They wrote that weeks after demonstrating they don't believe in those principles, I said quietly. The committee chair looked at the application, then at me. Dr. Maxwell, I know this is personal, but you're raising legitimate questions about leadership judgment. If they can't recognize a medical emergency in their own family, how are they managing patient care at their facility? That's my concern, I said. Healthcare leadership requires understanding the human cost of medical crises. They've demonstrated they don't have that understanding. The committee deliberated for 2 hours. They reviewed regional medical centers' patient satisfaction scores, below average. Reviewed family complaint data, higher than peer institutions. Reviewed my documentation of personal medical neglect. Their decision was unanimous. Application denied. Reason cited: concerns regarding leadership judgment, institutional culture around family-centered care, and disconnect between stated values and demonstrated behavior. Recommend leadership review before reapplication consideration. The denial letter went out Monday morning. My father called within an hour, furious. You tanked our grant application. Over a personal grudge. Over professional judgment concerns, I corrected. You claim to value family presence during medical crises, but you went on vacation while I was critical in ICU. That was different. How? How is it different? You're healthcare leaders who couldn't recognize your own child's medical emergency. You minimized septic shock as dramatic. You chose a beach over a bedside. My voice was steady. The committee had legitimate concerns about whether leaders with that judgment should receive public funding. You're punishing us for one vacation. I'm questioning whether people who dismiss life-threatening illness in their own family can be trusted to manage critical care for other families. I paused. The grant was for ICU expansion. You want funding to create the environment you abandoned when I needed it. Mom got on the phone. Jordan, you're destroying our careers over a misunderstanding. We thought you were fine. I was on a ventilator. Doctors exaggerate. We've been in healthcare long enough to know that. Dr. Chin didn't exaggerate. I had a 40% mortality risk. You just didn't want to hear it because it was inconvenient. My hands shook. You've spent my entire life telling me I exaggerate medical problems. This time it almost killed me. And you still can't see that you were wrong. The call ended with threats of legal action, accusations of abuse of power, demands that I recuse myself from anything involving their facility. I did recuse myself. Passed all future regional medical center applications to other reviewers. But I also provided them with full documentation of what had happened, ensuring context for any future funding decisions. Emma called that evening. Mom and Dad are losing it, saying you're vindictive and cruel, that you're using your position to get revenge. The committee made the decision, not me. I know, Jordan. I'm glad they did. Her voice was fierce. Maybe this will finally make them understand that dismissing medical emergencies has consequences. That you can't run a hospital while treating your own family's health as inconvenient. Regional Medical Center's Board of Directors launched an internal review after the grant denial. They examined patient care protocols, family satisfaction scores, and leadership decisions. They found patterns: family complaints about feeling dismissed, delayed response times to patient concerns, a culture that prioritized efficiency over empathy. My parents were asked to resign. Not because of me specifically, but because the grant denial had triggered scrutiny that revealed systemic problems in their leadership. They blamed me entirely. Told extended family I'd destroyed their careers over one misunderstanding. Half the family believed them. The other half, including Emma, quietly reached out to say they'd witnessed the pattern of medical dismissal for years and were relieved someone finally held them accountable. Dr. Chin wrote a letter to the medical board expressing concerns about healthcare administrators who demonstrate fundamental inability to recognize medical emergencies and prioritize patient welfare. The letter didn't name my parents, but the timing was clear. I keep the grant application in my office files. The one requesting funding for family-centered critical care from leaders who abandoned their own family during critical care. The disconnect between their written values and lived behavior preserved in official documentation. That application reminds me why grant review processes exist. Why we don't just fund based on technical merit but also assess leadership, culture, and demonstrated commitment to stated values. It reminds me that healthcare isn't abstract. It's personal. It's ICU beds and ventilators and the choice between vacation photos and bedsides. My parents will likely never understand why the committee denied their application. They see it as personal vendetta, not professional consequence. But the 8 committee members who reviewed the evidence understood. Dr. Chin understood. Emma understood. And somewhere, future patients at whatever facility my parents end up leading will benefit from the scrutiny their grant denial triggered. From the questions raised about leadership judgment and institutional culture. I survived septic shock. The scar from my emergency surgery runs 6 inches down my abdomen, a permanent reminder of the 4 days my parents told me I was being dramatic. That scar also reminds me that medical judgment matters. That healthcare leaders need to understand the human cost of dismissing symptoms. That vacation photos aren't more important than ICU bedsides. The grant committee agreed. And their denial letter, citing concerns regarding leadership judgment and disconnect between stated values and demonstrated behavior, is now part of public record. My parents call it vindictive. I call it accountability. Dr. Chin calls it protecting future patients. All 3 things can be true simultaneously.